Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow, sandy stroll back, way back, to ancient Egypt. You're not a tourist, not some stiff museum mannequin, and definitely not Cleopatra. No, you're just you, a slightly sunburned Egyptian with a clay, mug of beer and a mouthful of sand. We're going to spend this night learning how ancient Egyptians cleaned their teeth. Yes, with crushed rocks. And yes, they did it on purpose. Imagine waking up with desert breath, shuffling outside in your linen wrap, and then grinding your molars clean with a powder made of pumice stone, burnt eggshell, and maybe a splash of vinegar. Because mint hasn't been invented yet, and, honestly, your gums don't even know what comfort means. You probably won't survive this routine without bleeding a little. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from right now, and what time is it? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Thebes. It's not even sunrise yet, and the air already carries that warm, chalky smell of dust and donkey sweat. You wander barefoot across packed earth. Few neighbours are already up, swatting flies and boiling something sour in clay pots. You duck into your modest room, retrieve your hygiene bundle from a reed basket, and begin the day's most abrasive ritual, cleaning your teeth. Your toothpaste is more like sand seasoned with regret. A powder of ground pumice, powdered ox, hooves, myrrh, resin, and burnt eggshells. The eggshells are rich in calcium, so that's a win. The pumice is exfoliating, and the ox hooves, just a little extra protein probably. Historians still argue whether these mixtures were truly effective or just ritualistic, but one thing's for sure, your gums are crying a little. No toothbrush here either, just a frayed stick chewed at the end, called a chew stick, or maybe your finger dipped into the mixture and scrubbed across your teeth like you're seasoning a very unfortunate flatbread. If you were rich, maybe you had a linen cloth to buff your enamel. If you were dirt poor, well, the dirt probably was your toothbrush. People have actually found bundles of used tooth powder tucked into linen pouches, buried with the dead, because even in the afterlife, halitosis was a no-no. Now, let's talk taste. This gritty cocktail wasn't flavoured with mint or cloves. Instead, you got ash, rock, and the vague bitterness of burnt bone. Your mouth feels like you just licked a fireplace. But hey, it's better than letting your teeth rot straight out of your skull. Oddly, despite the extreme texture of their dental powders, ancient Egyptians cared deeply about oral cleanliness. Their surviving writings, even some dating back to 3000 BCE, reference dental pain and treatments. One scroll, known today as the Ebers Papyrus, includes recipes for curing tooth worms, which were blamed for decay and pain. Spoiler, there were no worms, just cavities and bacteria, but the word bacteria wouldn't make its dusty debut for another 4,000 years. And don't forget, your diet is doing no favours here. Egyptian bread, the daily staple, is ground from grain using stone mills. That means tiny bits of grit get baked into every loaf. So not only are you brushing your teeth with rocks, you're also chewing on them 3 times a day. By now, your mouth tastes like the inside of a tomb. You rinse with Nile water. It's not filtered, and a fish just winked at you, but that's fine. Ancient sources suggest people occasionally used beer to rinse, because nothing says fresh breath like barley ale and fish scales. A quick joke breaks the silence. Your neighbour, stumbling past in yesterday's tunic, coughs out a laugh and says, "Don't forget to polish your teeth for Ra." You smile. Sort of. Smiling too wide risks dislodging something. Your mouth is, relatively, clean now, not fresh, not minty, but functional. And that, in a way, is the heart of Egyptian dental care. Function over fragrance. Gritty solutions for gritty lives. No fluoride, no plastic floss. Just dedication, ritual, and a whole lot of ash. You gather your little pot of powder, and tuck it back into its hiding spot beneath a loose brick. Tooth powder was a precious commodity, and if someone swiped yours, you'd be left scrubbing your molars with sand and spit alone. As the sun edges over the Nile, you head outside, mouth buzzing slightly from the friction, and think to yourself, maybe tomorrow you'll go easy on the barley bread. The sun hasn't fully cleared the horizon, but the air already hums with life. Birds squabble in the reeds along the riverbank. A fisherman grunts as he pushes off into the misty Nile, his net slung over one shoulder, still damp from yesterday's catch. You stretch, yawn, and trudge back into your modest dwelling. A low-slung mud brick home tucked among a row of near-identical rectangles. You're not a farmer, not a priest, not a warrior. You're a scribe, a noble occupation in ancient Egypt, respected for its connection to the gods and bureaucracy alike. You don't till the fields or dig tombs. You copy decrees, translate letters. Sometimes you get to embellish a temple record with a little golden ink if your boss is in a generous mood. But before any of that, you have to get presentable. And that includes your teeth. You squat beside your reed basket again, lifting out your personal grooming kit. It's an eclectic little collection, an ivory comb with one broken tooth, a bronze mirror polished to a dull blur, a jar of scented oil, and of course, your trusty dental powder. The pot is nearly half empty. You've been meaning to restock, but the market vendor with the finest pumice blend is annoyingly specific. He's only open on odd-numbered days before noon, and only if he's in the mood. You pinch some powder between two fingers and repeat the morning's earlier ritual, though this time with more finesse. You hum a hymn to Thoth, god of wisdom and scribes, as you work the mixture across your teeth. It's still unpleasant. Imagine scrubbing your mouth with ground sidewalk, but somehow satisfying, clean, in a dusty, ancient kind of way. A little blood. Normal. Everyone's gums bleed a bit, or so you tell yourself. Once you're done, you rinse with water stored in a ceramic jug. It's been sitting out all night and has developed that slightly warm, earthy flavor that makes you question everything. You spit discreetly behind a clay pot housing your one struggling basil plant. You pause to oil your face, just a few drops of pressed moringa, and rub it into your cheeks and jaw. The oil hides the dryness caused by the desert air. It also leaves your skin vaguely shiny, like a low-rank deity on laundry day. Historians still argue whether Egyptian grooming rituals like these were rooted more in health, status, or superstition. Some believe cleanliness was linked to divine favor, clean body, clean soul. Others point out that noble households had dedicated servants just for applying eyeliner, so maybe hygiene was just another way to show off. Either way, your teeth are as clean as they're going to get. You adjust your linen kilt, not too high. It's a workday, not a festival. You fasten your belt, sling your scroll satchel over your shoulder, and make sure your reed pen is properly sharpened. You still remember the time you showed up to the temple archives with a dull stylus. The head priest stared at you for 10 full seconds, then made you copy 3 extra stelae as punishment. You step outside again, nodding at a neighbor carrying a basket of dried figs. He mutters something about sandstorms. You hope he's wrong. The walk to the scribe's chamber isn't long. Along the way, you pass other civil servants, record keepers, grain measurers, and the guy who makes tiny clay seals for papyrus scrolls. He's chewing on a bit of licorice root, one of the few naturally sweet, mildly breath-freshening options available. You make a mental note to pick some up. That, or a fresh date, something softer than your usual bread and rock combo. A friend, another scribe, catches up to you. He flashes a gap-toothed grin and whispers, "Did you hear? Neshi lost another molar." You wince. That's 3 in 6 months. His wife blames demons. He blames the barley. You just quietly resolve to chew on the left side of your mouth for the next few days. Inside the scribe's room, cool shadows stretch across the stone floor. You settle into your usual corner, unrolling your assignment scroll for the day. It's a tax record from a fishing village, tedious but manageable. Before you dip your reed pen in ink, you sneak one more moment to check your reflection in the dull bronze mirror. Your teeth, what's left of them, don't sparkle. But they're free of food bits and only slightly pink around the gums. A triumph by Bronze Age standards. You think about the afterlife, not the floating on a lotus kind, the real Judgment Day kind, when your heart gets weighed against a feather. The gods won't judge your teeth, but still, you like to imagine showing up with a smile. You settle in at your desk, a low wooden platform with a cushion that's seen better days, probably around the reign of Hatshepsut. The ink block is already set out, made from soot and gum Arabic, just waiting for a splash of water. You dip your reed pen, twist it slightly, and get to work on the tack scroll. The symbols come easily. You've been trained since childhood in the sacred art of hieratic script, a more relaxed cousin of formal hieroglyphs. Your hand moves automatically, even as your mind wanders. That's the thing about being a scribe. It's equal parts repetition and reverence. As you work, your jaw tightens. A low throb pulses near your back molar. You grit your teeth against it. Perhaps not the best move, considering the circumstances, and keep writing. You remember not long ago, your uncle complaining of the same pain. He tried everything. Honey, vinegar, spells, and finally letting a barber yank the tooth out with a fishbone hook. It did not go well. He eventually took to chewing on mint, leaves soaked in palm wine, claiming it helped dull the gods' hammering. Dental pain is common, expected even. You don't talk about it much. Complaining seems futile when there are no dentists, just traveling barbers with questionable aim and a love for herbal smoke. But deep down, you know the likely culprit. It's the bread. More specifically, it's the flour. The Egyptians love their bread, dense, hearty, and everywhere. It's a staple of every meal, and no one questions it. But the grinding process, less than ideal. Most flour is milled using basalt grinding stones. These stones wear down over time, leaving behind tiny fragments that sneak into the flour. You may as well be seasoning your dough with gravel. Historians still argue whether this dental disaster was known at the time. Some claim ancient texts hint at complaints about tooth wear. Others say the damage only became evident through modern archaeology. Mummified remains with ground-down molars, exposed, pulp and abscesses, all from a lifetime of chewing on what amounts to edible sandpaper. You once joked with another scribe that bread here doesn't go stale, it just gets sharper. At midday, the heat settles like a wool blanket over the city. You pause your work to stretch and step outside, where shade is a precious commodity. The priest's cat eyes you from a windowsill. It blinks, unimpressed. You suspect it knows more about oral hygiene than half the scribes you work with. You pluck a sprig of mint from a shared herb pot and pop it in your mouth. It's sharp, almost bitter, but it helps clear the taste of ink and dust. Egyptians believed mint had spiritual properties. It refreshed the breath and the soul. Plus, it masked the scent of whatever died inside your molars last week. You lean against a pillar, chewing thoughtfully, and recall a time you visited the house of a physician. Not a modern doctor, of course, more like a cross between a pharmacist, a priest, and a determined guesser. His home smelled of myrrh, onions, and something vaguely fishy. On his shelves were scrolls filled with spells, salves, and procedures. He'd shown you a paste made from crushed barley, ochre, and goose fat, supposedly a cure for bleeding gums. You weren't brave enough to try it, but you admired the creativity. The Egyptians weren't without medical knowledge, far from it. Some of their remedies were surprisingly effective, others less so. You'd heard of dental treatments involving honey, known for its antibacterial properties. There were also poultices with sycamore juice and resin applied to abscesses. But getting to that stage usually meant you were in a lot of pain. And pain here wasn't just discomfort. It was the kind of ache that blurred your vision and made you bargain with the gods. You spit out the mint, now a fibrous lump, and head back inside. The ink has dried slightly, so you re-wet it and continue your careful copying. Your pen scratches the surface of the papyrus like a beetle whispering secrets. The columns take shape, one tax line at a time. 5 goats from Huni, 3 jars of beer from Neferu, 1 worn sandal from an unpronounceable village. Bureaucracy, in all its ancient glory. Another wave of pain pulses through your gum. You lean back and rub your jaw. Part of you considers visiting the barber. But you've heard the stories, and you like having all your teeth. Or what's left of them. So, you make a mental checklist. Avoid the coarse end of the bread loaf. Chew with the other side. Maybe swish some wine before bed. Try not to sleep with your mouth open. The desert air dries everything out, and you wake up tasting like an old scroll. Around you, the scriptorium buzzes quietly. One scribe hums an old folk tune. Another is clearly asleep, reed pen still in, hand, ink pooling slowly under his cheek. You smile, in spite of the ache, and return to your work. Because in this dusty little chamber beside the Nile, among ink pots and crumbling scrolls, life goes on, teeth or no teeth. The sun begins its slow descent over the Nile, casting long shadows that stretch like lazy cats across the limestone courtyards. The day's heat lingers, trapped in sandstone walls and clay pots. You feel it in your bones as you leave the scriptorium, rubbing your jaw absently, trying not to wince. Evening is when the city exhales. Women rinse vegetables in shared basins. Children chase each other with clay dolls and little palm frond animals. Somewhere nearby, a priest chants the final verses of a purification ritual, his voice rolling like a lullaby for the gods. You wander toward the home of a friend, Mena, a junior priest with a fascination for medicinal spells and scented oils. His place is always dimly lit and smells like lotus paste and ash. Mena is the kind of man who talks in half whispers, like everything he says is classified information from Ra himself. But he's useful, especially when your teeth feel like they've been trampled by a donkey. When you arrive, he's brewing something thick and greenish in a blackened pot. He greets you with a grunt and a gesture to sit. You ask if he has anything, for tooth pain. He lifts an eyebrow. Honey and crushed frankincense, he says. Or if it's bad, we could try the lizard fat method. You stare at him. He doesn't blink. You decline. Instead, he offers to recite a spell from the Ebers Papyrus, one of those ancient medical texts filled with everything from eye salves to methods for removing curses. This one involves invoking the god Horus to draw out the worm that eats at the tooth. Mena insists the worm is real. Tiny, invisible, lives in the gums, hungry. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians genuinely believed in toothworms, or if it was just poetic metaphor. But judging by Mena's solemn face and the jar labelled toothworm remedy, you suspect he's fully on board. He dips a reed, brush into a mix of honey and resin, then carefully applies it to a ball of linen. You bite down on it reluctantly. It's sticky, oddly spicy, and vaguely unpleasant, but somehow soothing. As you sit there, mouth half full of ancient dental gauze, Mena explains how oral care fits into the bigger spiritual picture. Egyptians didn't just treat the body, they treated the soul attached to it. If your breath stank, it wasn't just a sign of tooth decay. It could mean spiritual impurity, rotten teeth. Maybe your car, your spiritual essence, was suffering. That might explain why some remedies involved not just herbs, but prayers, amulets, and sleep rituals. Mena lights a bit of myrrh resin on a tiny censer. The smoke curls toward the ceiling, mixing with the faint aroma of onion and fig from someone's dinner next door. He begins to chant under his breath. You can't make out all the words, but you recognize the name of Sekhmet, the lion-headed, goddess of healing and destruction. Always a reassuring combination. After a few minutes, he pulls the linen from your mouth and peers inside like a chef inspecting bread dough. It's still there, he says, poking your cheek. But perhaps it's quieter. You thank him, leave a token offering of dried fish, and make your way back home under a sky now dotted with stars. The air has cooled just enough to make breathing pleasant. You pass a neighbor chewing on fennel stalks. Common wisdom says it freshens breath and soothes the stomach. Back at your own home, a simple mud brick affair with a reed mat floor and walls decorated with faded lotus designs. You sit on the edge of your sleeping platform. You take a small sip of date beer, thick, yeasty, and suspiciously chewy. Not the best thing for your teeth, but better than nothing. Plus, the slight buzz helps you ignore the dull ache pulsing in your jaw. You rummage through your personal stash of herbal bits, mint, myrrh, dried ginger, and something you're pretty sure is crushed lotus seed. Not for pain, just for dreaming. You light a small oil lamp. Shadows flicker on the walls, dancing like sleepy ghosts. As you lie down, head on a cushion stuffed with reeds, you reflect on just how much of your day has revolved around this one molar. A single, rebellious tooth, dictating your mood, your meals, even your social calendar, and tomorrow you'll wake up, scrub your teeth with that gritty natron powder, and pretend this isn't just an elaborate way to sandpaper your enamel. You remember a time when a traveller from Nubia stayed with your family. She brought her own dental powder, charcoal, mixed with clove and burned date pits. You tried it once, tasted like ash and campfire, but your mouth felt cleaner, fresher, and the Nubian woman, her teeth were whiter than alabaster and somehow, miraculously, still intact. You make a mental note to try that again. Tonight, though, you dream of crocodiles with golden teeth, swimming through the Nile, offering dental advice in exchange for dates. One wears a priest's collar, another brushes his fangs with a tiny papyrus scroll. Morning comes with the soft rustle of woven reed curtains and the slow, warm creep of sunlight along your wall. A rooster, not yours, but somebody's, crows somewhere nearby, and a sleepy donkey complains in the distance. You stretch, yawn, and run your tongue cautiously along your sore gum, still tender. But not worse. You shuffle to your basin and splash your face with cool water. Then comes the daily ritual, grabbing your little pot of natron powder. It's clumpy today, humidity's gotten into it, but you pinch some between your fingers and rub it along your teeth anyway. It tastes like salt and dirt and makes your mouth feel like a sandstone floor. You rinse with a swig of tepid barley water, hoping that will soften the sting. Then you're off to the workshop. Today, you'll be painting funerary masks, one of the more calming jobs. But on the way, you make a small detour to the home of Deddy the reed seller. He's older than the Nile, half blind, and always chewing on something that smells like pine. You ask him about alternatives to natron. He grins, revealing a few teeth that seem more decorative than functional. Cinnamon bark, he says, crushed goosefoot seed, and if you're brave, powdered. Crocodile tooth, you're not brave. Still, Deddy sells you a bundle of sweet flag root. Chew this when your mouth feels wrong. It keeps the demons away, he adds, nodding gravely. You don't ask follow-up questions. You just take the bundle and carry on. At the workshop, the other artisans are already busy. The air smells of beeswax and paint, comforting scents. You settle into your spot, carefully mixing ochre and lapis pigment with egg yolk. Every now and then, you catch one of your co-workers smacking his gums like a contented cow. You ask what? He's chewing. Mint and celery seed. My wife swears it keeps the breath fresh. You make a note. So far you've heard about fennel, sweet flag, celery, cinnamon, myrrh, natron, and something involving lizard fat. It's starting to feel less like dental hygiene and more like assembling a spice rack. That afternoon, a caravan arrives from the eastern desert. Traders with sun-darkened faces unload goods. Alabaster, carnelian beads, dried figs, and, more interestingly, baskets of herbs from the Red Sea coast. You wander over during your break, eyes scanning for anything tooth-related. One trader shows you a waxy clump of mastic gum. From the pistachia tree, he says. You chew it. Makes your teeth shine. You buy a small lump. It's expensive, but your mouth's been through a lot lately. Back home that evening, you light your little lamp and take out the mastic. It's sticky and bitter at first, but quickly turns smooth. Your jaw works slowly, thoughtfully, while outside the wind rustles through papyrus leaves. It's easy to forget just how much work it takes to maintain a mouth in this century. You don't have toothbrushes, at least not as modern people know them. You have chews and powders and pastes made from things that sound suspiciously like the ingredients in a stew. You don't have dentists, just priests, healers, and your cousin's dubious friend who once tried to cure his own toothache by biting a hot rock. And still, people smile, broadly, proudly, even while their molars quietly disintegrate. Historians still argue whether the average Egyptian truly cared about their dental health, or whether these rituals were mostly for spiritual cleanliness. But based on how often people walk around town with sticks in their mouths and breath that smells faintly of mint, you're leaning toward they did care, especially if they wanted to kiss anyone. You chew until the mastic softens your thoughts. The lamp flickers low. Outside, someone sings to a crying baby. And somewhere else, a dog starts barking, then decides it's not worth the effort. You think of a woman you once saw at the temple. Her teeth were nearly perfect, a rarity. You overheard her say she rubbed them with powdered fish bones. Your first instinct was to gag. Your second was curiosity. And isn't that always the way with ancient medicine? You remember your grandmother's advice. If it stings your nose and smells like a tomb, it probably works. You're beginning to see her point. Tonight, as you roll out your mat and rest your head again on reeds that crinkle slightly with each movement, you tuck the remaining piece of mastic under your linen cloth. Tomorrow, you'll chew it again. Maybe by then, your tooth will finally stop humming like a low drumbeat in your skull. Or maybe it won't. Maybe you'll have to ask the temple scribe to draw up a petition to Thoth, god of wisdom and science, asking politely if he'd mind nudging your molar back into place. Stranger things have happened. The next morning, the pain is dull but bearable, more of a nagging presence than a full-blown crisis. You thank your lucky scarab that it hasn't gotten worse and shuffle out into the slowly waking street, mastic gum still clinging stubbornly to a back tooth like it's made a home there. Today is market day, and the town square is already filling with noise. You pass date sellers arranging sticky pyramids of fruit, linen merchants shaking out long bolts of sky-coloured fabric, and a girl carrying a live goose under one arm, honking indignantly with each step. But you're not here for fruit or fabric. You're here for teeth, specifically to speak with the old herbalist woman who sits beneath the sycamore tree, selling remedies for everything from snakebite to flatulence. She's known only as Teti, which, she insists, means the one who talks to plants. She also claims to have once healed a pharaoh's canker sore, but historians would likely raise an eyebrow at that. You squat beside her little mat, careful not to knock over her pyramid of dried lotus pods. Titi's eyes narrow at you through a mass of wrinkles. Gum pain, you say quietly. She nods like she's been expecting this moment your entire life. Tongue tingling, jaw stiffness. Did the tooth dream speak to you last night? No dreams, just aching. She hums and rummages through a basket until she pulls out a crumbling stick of what smells like burnt honey. Licorice root, she explains. Boil it with onion skin and date vinegar. Swish it but don't swallow, or you'll have dreams you don't want. You agree, perhaps too quickly. Teti chuckles, revealing teeth stained the colour of old wood. People think tooth pain is just about food, but it's also about words, unspoken anger, swallowed secrets. You thank her and leave with your strange brew ingredients, and a growing suspicion that Teti might have skipped lunch one too many times. Back at home, you attempt the concoction. It simmers in your clay pot, filling the room with the scent of a roasted market stall. The first rinse burns like a curse, but afterward, blessed relief. Or maybe just numbness. Either way, it feels like progress. Later, during a visit to your cousin's house, you overhear a fascinating argument. He and a friend are debating whether bad teeth are caused by eating too many dates or not praying to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of plagues. The friend insists he once fasted for 7 days, eating only barley gruel, and his teeth felt like river stones. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians believed dental pain came from diet, spirits, or simply the gods having a slow day. Papyrus scrolls suggest all three explanations, sometimes in the same paragraph. You smile politely and bite into a pomegranate seed, then immediately regret it. A bolt of pain zings through your jaw like a spear hurled by an impatient god. Back home again, you lie on your mat with a cloth over your eyes. The sun beats against the wall, lazy and relentless. Somewhere nearby, a carpenter hammers at a chair leg. Each thump feels like a miniature earthquake inside your skull. That night, you dream, not of pain, but of bees. Hundreds of them, all crawling across your gums, whispering in a language you don't understand. You wake up drooling into your reed pillow, the scent of onions still lingering in the air. It's time for stronger measures. At the temple the next day, you wait in line not for prayer, but for a consultation with the temple physician. He's a man of few words and many oils, his linen robes stained with soot and copper salve. He listens to your description, tilts your head back, squints at your molars and mutters, "Upper second premolar, shadowed, might be a worm." You blink. A worm? He nods sagely. Some say they crawl in from old meat. Others say they hatch in bad thoughts, but they always settle in the back teeth. You need a poultice. The physician mixes something in a tiny bronze bowl. Olive oil, crushed barley, a sprinkle of salt, and what smells disturbingly like old ash. He rolls it into a waxy plug and instructs you to hold it against the sawtooth while you sleep. You may dream of birds. That's normal. You don't question him. You've long passed the point of questioning. That night, you place the poultice where the pain lives. It's gritty and weirdly warm. And yes, you dream of birds, mostly ibis, strutting around a field full of toothbrushes, arguing about proper gum care. The next morning, the pain is gone. Well, not gone, but muffled, distant, like it's taken a walk to the edge of your skull and is considering whether or not to come back. You spit out what's left of the poultice, say a small thank you to Thoth, and chew a piece of mint leaf in celebration. That afternoon, you walk along the riverbank, watching fishermen haul in their slippery prizes, while ibis birds peck at scraps nearby. A child runs past, waving a stalk of sugarcane like a sword. You wave back and feel, dare you say it, hopeful. You start to wonder what other dental secrets your ancestors might have buried in forgotten jars or temple scrolls. Somewhere, someone probably discovered the perfect mix of herbs and stones that makes toothaches vanish forever. You just haven't found it yet, but at least now, your breath smells faintly of licorice. That's something. You wake up the next day in an unusually good mood. Your jaw doesn't throb with every heartbeat. There's still a dull awareness in that troublesome molar, like a neighbor who's stopped throwing parties but still stomps a bit. But the sharp spikes of pain have retreated. Naturally, you reward yourself with honey cakes. Soft ones, of course. You chew cautiously, like someone who's been betrayed by bread before. And as the sweet crumble melts on your tongue, you feel, dare you say, almost victorious. The relief is short-lived. By midday, the ache begins to creep back in. Slyly, like a cat returning after knocking something off a shelf. You sigh and push away the last of your honey cake. Time for another remedy. This time, you turn to your cousin's wife, an expert in what she calls kitchen pharmacy. She swears her grandfather kept all his teeth well into his 60s, and that his secret was green clay paste and patience. She pulls a clay pot from a shadowy shelf. Inside is a thick, greenish substance that smells faintly like wet papyrus and something metallic. Crushed malachite, she explains, smearing some on her finger, mixed with vinegar, myrrh, and a little natron. It draws out the bad humours, but don't swallow it, or you'll burp like a frog for 3 days. Naturally, you agree not to swallow. She applies the green goop to your gum with surprising tenderness. The first sensation is cold, then a kind of fizzy sting that makes your eyes water. Then comes numbness. You blink. The pain really does seem quieter. Not gone. Just attending a silent meditation retreat. You spend the next few hours lounging under a fig tree, gently drooling green paste into a cloth. It's not dignified, but you're far past the point of dignity. As the sun lowers, you watch children skipping stones on the Nile and reflect on the sheer effort required just to not be in pain. And yet somehow, ancient Egyptians figured out dozens of ways to manage toothaches without ever inventing Novocaine. Historians still argue whether malachite was genuinely effective for pain relief or if it simply numbed people via mild toxicity. But if your molar can be fooled by a rock and some vinegar, you're not going to argue. Later that evening, a neighbor stops by, a flax weaver with a suspiciously wide smile. You mention your aching tooth, and she nods gravely. Have you tried the crocodile dung poultice? She asks. You hesitate. Is that a thing? She nods with the solemnity of someone revealing a sacred rite. Oh yes. Mixed with goose fat and fennel. Applied nightly for a week. You consider it, then glance at the green clay still crusting your lips. I'm trying the malachite one first, you say, not unkindly. That night, you light a bit of ivy, frankincense, lie back on your mat and stare at the ceiling. The room smells like clay and burned sugar. You've decided to skip the crocodile dung, at least for now. There are limits, after all. Just before sleep claims you, a strange memory drifts up. You're a child again, and your grandmother is brushing her teeth with a bundle of chewed-on twigs. She'd called it her smiling stick. She used to say, "A good scrub today keeps Anubis away." You remember watching her rhythmically gnaw at the wood, her teeth bright even in the candlelight. You also remember the peculiar squeaking sound it made, which for some reason now seems oddly comforting. So, in the morning, you go hunting for one. Not just any stick, of course. You're looking for the traditional Egyptian miswak, a toothbrush tree twig. Salvadora persica, if you're feeling fancy. You ask a merchant by the spice alley. He shrugs and points toward a patch of shrubs near the eastern gate. An hour later, you're triumphantly holding a bundle of skinny branches that smell faintly peppery. You peel back the bark, chew the end, and soon you're scrubbing your molars with gusto. It's surprisingly satisfying. Earthy, fibrous, a little spicy. A passing farmer eyes you and mutters, "Another twig chewer." You wave cheerfully with your green-crusted hand. By midday, your jaw pain has leveled off again. You rinse your mouth with cool river water and feel a strange sense of balance, like you and your molar have reached a kind of ceasefire. You continue your twig routine for days, morning, evening, after meals. You become a bit of a miswak evangelist. Your cousin jokes that you're turning into a tree, but here's the thing, it works. Or maybe it's the clay, or the salt, or the waxy poultice, or just time. Historians still debate which of these ancient methods were truly medicinal and which were more spiritual. But the truth is, for you, they all blur together. Ancient Egyptian dental care wasn't just about science. It was ritual, intuition, a bit of trial and error, and a whole lot of creative discomfort. You can't help but feel proud. You've fended off the tooth demons with rocks, herbs, vinegar, and sheer stubbornness. And your breath? It smells faintly of mint and river mud, which in this world counts as fresh. You've developed a bit of a rhythm now. Wake up, stretch, chew your miswak stick like a philosophical goat, swish some salty water, dab a little clay paste if things feel tender. And then, if the Nile breeze is right, you take a slow walk past the marketplace to see what other dental oddities the world might have in store. Your cousin joins you today. He's just returned from a trip to the Fayum region, and he's brought with him what he insists is the ultimate oral health talisman, a tiny carved amulet no bigger than a fig seed in the shape of a baboon. You raise an eyebrow. It's Thoth's animal, he explains, patting the little creature nestled in his palm. He was the god of wisdom, of scribes, and yes, of medical knowledge. So you pray to the baboon for a toothache. Exactly, he says, with complete seriousness. You whisper your pain into it, then sleep with it under your tongue. You stare, he shrugs. It's better than dung. Fair point. Later that day, you find yourself back in the temple quarter, specifically at the House of Life. It's not just a library, but a kind of healing center, a place where priest-physicians copy down centuries of accumulated remedies, myths, and recipes. You've heard whispers of papyrus scrolls that describe spells for strengthening gums, warding off toothworms, even reversing decay with the help of the gods. You manage to charm your way into the outer chambers, mostly by offering to sweep up dust and pretend you know how to handle a scroll. And there it is, nestled between a guide to embalming fish and a list of lunar fertility omens is a scroll titled simply, On the Quieting of the Jaw. You tilt your head, intrigued. The script is faded, but you can make out the instructions. Recite this prayer by moonlight, then rub the gum with crushed carob and frankincense, warmed under the breath of a black cat. You blink, a lot to unpack there. You copy down what you can. You don't have a black cat, but you figure your neighbor's grumpy grey one might count. If you squint, you perform the ritual that evening, whispering the lines, smearing the sweet, gritty paste along your gums, gently cradling the grey cat under your chin. It hisses once, then settles. You feel vaguely ridiculous, but oddly calm. Historians still debate whether these temple prescriptions were ever meant to be medicine in our modern sense, or whether they functioned more like guided meditations, symbolic actions that helped people soothe pain by focusing attention and intention. Either way, your jaw feels a little better. You lie back on your woven mat and consider the incredible lengths to which your ancestors went just to keep their teeth from revolting. And they didn't stop with chewing sticks, sacred cats, and sour paste. Third, next morning, you overhear a conversation near the boat dock. An old man is describing the tooth calendar used by fishermen. Apparently, they believe toothaches come in cycles, like tides. On certain days of the lunar month, pain is pulled by the moon's energy and should never be treated. On others, the moon loosens the roots, making it ideal for extraction, or, as they poetically call it, letting the tooth fly free. You sidle closer. The man squints at you and asks, "What day were you born?" You tell him. He nods, slowly. Then today is not your day. Wait until the 9th crescent. The ache will rise, then pass, or worsen. He nods again. Yes, that too. Wonderful. You spend the afternoon journaling your pain levels on a scrap of linen. You're not entirely convinced by the moon theory, but you are oddly soothed by tracking it. Maybe it's the act of turning pain into data. Maybe it's just something to do with your hands while you chew your twig. That night, you meet a woman who's travelled from Nubia. She's visiting relatives and happens to be an herbalist. Naturally, the conversation turns to teeth. She tells you that in her village, they burn dried tamarind pods and let the smoke waft into the mouth. The bitterness chases the bad spirits, she says. You ask if it works. She laughs. No idea, but it makes the goats sneeze. You try it anyway. The smoky tang lingers on your tongue and makes your gums feel oddly tingly, like you've gargled with citrus. It's not unpleasant. You've now officially reached the stage of your journey where you will try almost anything. Vinegar rinses, goat hair floss, even fasting just to starve the worms. And every now and then, in the middle of all this, you catch your reflection in a polished copper plate and pause. Your teeth are not perfect. They're worn, slightly yellowed from the wine-coloured beer. There's a dark line near your back molar that you suspect is the same troublemaker from before. But there's also something else. They're still there. You still chew, still smile, still argue, sing, mutter, and breathe through that same imperfect mouth. You think of the amulet, of the woman with the tamarind pods, of the scroll with its moonlit rituals and spicy poultices. And you realize that your ancestors weren't fighting against decay so much as dancing with it, working with what they had. Rocks, resins, prayers, and all to keep the pain at bay just a little longer, just long enough to laugh, or eat, or kiss someone on the cheek without wincing, and maybe that's enough. By now, you've embraced your new role, full-time experimental dental historian. You've chewed sticks and clay, prayed to baboons, recited lunar incantations, and accidentally smoked yourself out of your own kitchen with tamarind fumes. Your friends have started calling you the Tooth Oracle, which you pretend to hate but secretly enjoy. This morning, though, you're ready to try something different, something a little less mystical. You've heard whispers about a more mechanical solution, one that skips the herbs and gods entirely and heads straight for the problem: extraction. Now, before you panic, remember, this isn't modern surgery. There's no reclining chair, no minty rinse, no gentle voice saying, "You'll feel just a little pressure." There is only you, a semi-retired priest with steady hands, and a tool that looks suspiciously like a meat hook. You've been warned. And yet, here you are. You arrive early at his modest home near the temple granaries. He greets you with a warm smile, mostly gums, and gestures to a reed mat. You sit. You breathe. I pull. You nod, mostly to convince yourself. He examines your mouth, pokes around with a bronze probe, and frowns. "Too early," he mutters. "Still strong. Let's wait." You're torn between relief and disappointment. Then you realize you just got gently rejected by an ancient dentist. He hands you a little satchel instead. Inside is powdered malachite mixed with honey. "Rub this before sleep," he says, "and tell no one I gave it to you." That night, you lie down and dab the mix onto your sore molar. The cool mineral soothes your gums, and the honey sticks in all the wrong places, but there's something comforting about it, like nature's cough drop, if it also stained your sheets green. Historians still debate whether malachite had true antimicrobial benefits, or whether its popularity came from its stunning color and mystical associations. Either way, you sleep better than you have in days. In the dream, your teeth fall out in a waterfall. You catch them in a basket made of crocodile leather. The baboon amulet claps. The next morning, you're off to the riverbank, not to fish, but to visit one of the oldest known tooth healers in your region, a woman said to specialize in cracked enamel and inflamed gums. She greets you without a word, gestures for you to sit, and starts grinding something in a bowl. It smells like pepper and something sour. "Is that onion?" She nods. "Wild onion. Grows near the canal. Good for swelling." You eye the mixture. She hands you a swab made from marsh reeds and instructs you to chew slowly, then spit into the river. You do as told. The flavor is not relaxing. It's somewhere between spicy pickle and regret. Your eyes water. Your gums sting. A nearby ibis flaps away in protest, but strangely, it helps. The inflammation fades by evening, and your breath, according to your sister, now smells like a warrior's stew. You take it as a compliment. Over the next few days, you explore more low-tech options. You try rinsing with diluted wine, which feels strangely fancy until you realize it was likely done out of desperation, not luxury. Then you experiment with charcoal ash, a trick used by desert traders. You mix a bit with date syrup and rub it along the gum line. The result? A mouth that looks like you bit a chimney. But the paste does seem to draw out irritation. Charcoal, you learn, binds to toxins. At least, that's what the traveling merchant told you while selling it in tiny clay pots wrapped in woven grass. He also tried to sell you lion's tooth dust, but you passed on that one. Still, the ash earns a permanent place in your makeshift dental kit. One afternoon, you find yourself helping a friend gather salt from evaporated Nile pools. While you work, she casually shares her grandmother's advice. If your teeth throb, lick a stone. You pause. Stone, she nods. A dry one, from the south-facing cliff. They hold the sun. You're too tired to argue. You pick up a sun-warmed pebble, rinse it off, and place it gently between your cheek and gum. It's oddly soothing, like a sleepy little sun tucked inside your mouth. You start doing it more often, during walks, while waiting for water to boil, even during temple readings. People start gifting you nice pebbles. One is heart-shaped. Another has a spiral like a tiny fossil. They call you stone chewer. You pretend to hate that too. Historians still argue whether this practice had any medical merit, or whether it was just a prehistoric stress ball for the anxious mouth. Either way, it works for you. And now, almost without realizing it, you've begun to craft your own dental ritual, one that blends the best of everything. Morning twig, sunstone in the afternoon, smoky rinse at dusk, and malachite paste on troubled nights. You've even started humming to your sore tooth, which you now affectionately call Old Chipper. Sometimes routine is the best remedy of all. One evening, your cousin visits again. He notices your improved chewing and raises an eyebrow. Still praying to the baboon? You grin. No need. He retired. It's morning again. The Nile is already warm, the air thick with that humid buzz that wraps around you like a linen shawl that never lets go. You sit by the courtyard steps, rhythmically running your frayed twig across your teeth like a maestro of ancient oral hygiene. It's become second nature now, a meditative ritual, a slow scraping lullaby for your molars. But today, you crave variety, a little novelty in your tooth care routine. Enter clove oil, or more accurately, what ancient Egyptian traders believed was clove oil, a pungent resinous liquid imported through indirect trade from lands so far east that they might as well be a myth. Some call it flower root essence, others simply sting drops. It comes to you in a tightly sealed alabaster vial. You unscrew the cap and immediately wince. It smells like spiced thunder. The tooth with the mild ache, it's about to meet its match. You dab a drop onto a linen swab, carefully press it against the sore spot, and, well, the burn is impressive. Not painful exactly, more like your mouth is doing a slow-motion cartwheel. And then, relief. Gentle, clear, expansive relief. Like your gums just did yoga. Historians still argue whether this ancient import was actually clove, cinnamon bark, or a long-lost tree resin from Nubia. You mutter aloud, mimicking the traveling merchant who sold it to you. A neighbor overhears and asks what you're doing. You look at him, eyes watering, mouth slightly ajar, and say, "Spicing my teeth." He backs away. Later that day, while hauling reeds from the riverbank, you meet a woman with a brilliant smile, practically glowing in the sun. She's missing only one tooth, front and center, but the gap seems to give her character, not shame. You mention your experiments with twigs and clove and pebbles and ash. She laughs and shares one of her own favorites, red ochre. "Yes," she says, "the paint. For gums. My aunt swears by it." You blink. "But isn't that for murals?" She shrugs. The mouth is its own canvas. You try it later that night. Just a dab of red ochre powder mixed with fig sap. The color is shockingly bright, like lipstick invented by fire. And weirdly, it tingles. You swear the aching tooth calms down within minutes. You now have a color palette for your gums. Who knew dental care could be this artistic? You start mixing and matching. One day you go full charcoal for the moody look. Next day, it's ochre with a side of mint leaf. Chew. Someone tells you mint was sacred to Hathor, goddess of joy. You believe it. Chewing the fresh leaves feels like tiny festivals for your teeth. Your mother, however, is not impressed. She thinks you've gone too far. "You used to just rinse with warm beer," she mutters, not looking up from her weaving. You pause. "Wait, warm beer?" She nods. "That's what we did growing up. Before all your rocks and twigs and spice trees." You decide to give it a try. The beer, slightly sour and flat, has the warmth of a sun-baked pot. You rinse, swish, spit. Surprisingly pleasant. It's mildly antiseptic, soothing, and makes you a little giggly. The next morning, your cousin catches you rinsing with beer and raising your eyebrows in delight. You've finally gone soft. You smile. "I've gone foamy. At this point, your dental routine is more elaborate than your skincare. You've even considered opening a booth, tooth spells and sun pebbles, but fear the priest might not appreciate the competition. And then, one lazy afternoon, as you rest near the granary, an older scribe sits beside you. He carries a faded scroll and hands it over. "Thought you might like this," he says. It's brittle, hand-copied, and smells faintly of cumin, but the drawings are clear. Rudimentary illustrations of open mouths, various twigs, even an annotated diagram of gum inflammation with tiny hieroglyphs pointing to different remedies. You study it like a sacred map. Historians still debate whether these scrolls were formal medical guides or simply clever scribes documenting local wisdom. The man murmurs, half asleep. Either way, you've just unlocked the ultimate cheat sheet. You copy a few recipes into your own papyrus journal. One suggests chewing dried pomegranate rind for astringency. Another recommends soaking acacia thorns in honey and resting them along the gum line. You test both within the week. The pomegranate is tart and sharp, like licking ambition. The acacia method, though, oddly gentle. Like the plant itself is whispering, "You've suffered enough." You start sharing your favorites with others. A child with a toothache gets your sun pebble trick. An elderly neighbor tries the malachite honey combo and says it made her dream of emerald rain. Word spreads. People stop you in the market. Tooth sage, they call you now. And you wear it proudly. Because let's face it, you've turned an aching nuisance into a personal renaissance. You've tested, failed, stained your sheets, scared off neighbors with spice fumes, and in the process, created a small oral empire. Somewhere, deep in a tomb, a baboon-headed god is smiling. God is smiling. Your mornings are no longer rushed. You wake up, stretch, and wander toward the basin with your own hand-mixed concoction of tooth powder, a bit of crushed rock salt, dried mint, some charred breadcrumbs for the crunch, and, if you're feeling fancy, a dab of sweet myrrh resin. You lean over, gently swishing your rinse, watching a trail of tiny ash particles swirl down the side of the basin like silt in the Nile. By now, people don't even question it. You've become the unofficial neighborhood mouth magician. It's a title you didn't ask for, but accept with a smug grin that gleams faintly from all your habitual polishing. Today, though, brings something new. A traveling merchant from Byblos has arrived, hawking odd-smelling pastes stored in tiny ceramic jars. One smells like hot tar and old onions. Another has the consistency of whipped sand and smells vaguely of lemons, something rare in your world. You approach him cautiously, watching as he rubs a small smear on his front teeth and flashes a proud, too-wide grin. You sniff. "What's in it?" he whispers. "Pulverized oyster shell and pine gum. Imported." You consider this. Historians still argue whether early imported toothpastes like these were actual health remedies or simply exotic novelty items for Egypt's wealthiest nobles. You buy one jar anyway. Curiosity wins. That night, under a flickering oil lamp, you apply the paste. It feels gritty and warm. The pine gum gives off a faint forest scent, as if you're brushing your teeth inside a cedar chest. And yet, there's something about it that feels showy. Like this paste was never meant for everyday use. It's dental theatre. So the next morning, you return to your tried and true twig and rock combo. Simpler, familiar, grounded. You head to the riverbank to gather more cleansing pebbles and spot a group of young boys laughing as they toss fist-sized stones into the water. One of them runs over and holds out a flat, almost glassy piece of quartz. "For your teeth," he grins. You nod solemnly. "Only if it doesn't cut my gums this time." He laughs, and you remember, this whole thing started with pain. But now, it's become play, art, identity. You invite the boys to help you sort stones. You explain what to look for. No jagged edges, light in color, smooth under the thumb. They listen, wide-eyed. You teach them how to test a pebble's texture on the soft skin inside the wrist before putting it near a tooth. One boy mimics your charcoal rubbing technique and ends up looking like he's grown a fashionable little beard. You declare him the new scribe of smiles. Later that week, your cousin challenges you to make a mouth perfume, something that smells nice and helps clean the tongue. You spend hours boiling basil and coriander in goat's milk, straining it through linen, then stirring in a pinch of date sugar. The result is surprisingly floral. You test it. The taste is unusual but fresh, slightly sour, slightly sweet. You catch yourself humming, and so begins the era of tongue tonics. You start collecting herbs. You ask farmers if you can buy odd plants. You barter with spice traders. Eventually, your personal shelf of flavor experiments rivals that of the temple. Perfumers. You try lotus root, ginger shavings, barley vinegar, each one a surprise. Some make you recoil. Others you savor. Your mother catches you sniffing a jar of dried horseradish and muttering notes like, sharp but ambitious. She sighs. You need a real job. You reply, this is my job. I've prevented 3 tooth extractions this week alone. To be fair, you did save that elderly woman from the barber priest's pliers. Just a simple mix of cooled cinnamon tea and a salt rinse. Her gums stopped bleeding in 2 days. She called it a miracle. You called it hydration. Still, not everything works. That lotus root mixture turned to paste and sealed your mouth shut for 10 minutes. That barley vinegar rinse gave you the hiccups and a nosebleed. But failure is part of the fun, part of the legend. One morning, the high priest of Thoth sends a runner to your home. You panic, thinking you've angered the gods with all your herbal experiments. But no, it's the opposite. The priest wants to know what you've been giving the scribes. They've stopped complaining about mouth pain. They've stopped chewing papyrus when stressed. It's unsettling. You offer a modest scroll with your tooth powder recipe. The priest skims it. Crushed barley in the mouth? You shrug. It's exfoliating. He raises an eyebrow. You should write this down more formally. So you do. That night, under flickering torchlight, you draft your first official papyrus manuscript, a catalogue of cleansing, remedies for the mouth and its woes. You draw small diagrams, tiny pebbles, open mouths, sprigs of herbs. You annotate notes like cooling but bitter and may cause mild numbness. Do not panic. You feel oddly fulfilled. Historians still debate whether such personal hygiene texts were widely copied or remained rare. Handwritten gems passed through families or temple healers. But in your case, you tuck a copy under your mat, just in case some future archaeologist wants to know what really made ancient teeth shine. And tomorrow, you're trying cinnamon oil and river mint, because why stop now? You've barely rubbed the sleep from your eyes when a knock sounds at the door. Not the polite kind either. This knock carries urgency, authority. You shuffle over, half expecting it to be another cousin with a toothache. But no, it's the palace steward, draped in linen so white it glows in the morning light. The man barely waits for you to speak before announcing, you've been summoned. You blink. To where? He sighs, as if you should already know. The palace, of course. The queen has heard of your mouth powders. Oh no. Now, if you're wondering why this might terrify a simple pebble-collecting enthusiast like yourself, consider this. Queens aren't just royalty. They're divine representations of Mayat, the balance of the universe. If you mess this up, the balance could tip, and you'll be lucky to end up scooping goose droppings by the Nile for the rest of your days. Still, you grab your best satchel, filled with your freshest mix. Powdered rose petals, cinnamon bark, pulverized rock salt, and a pinch of dried date mash. It smells oddly romantic. You also toss in a few backup ingredients, just in case the queen's preferences lean. More temple incense than kitchen spice rack. Inside the palace, it's cool, quiet, and terrifyingly clean. A scribe leads you through arched corridors and into a sunlit chamber where the queen lounges on a carved cedar bench, her smile unreadable. Her first words? I hear you scrub your mouth with rocks. You freeze, then nod. Yes, Your Grace. But, gently, she laughs. Good. I'm not interested in bleeding. So, you kneel and begin your work, gently tapping out a bit of powder into a gilded dish, mixing in a few drops of mint oil, dipping a soft twig into the mixture, and demonstrating the brushing technique on yourself first. Then you pass her the twig. There's a long pause as she examines it, skeptical. It smells like spiced bread. You blink. That's intentional, Your Grace. She tries it. The silence is heavy, so heavy that even the fan-waving servant behind her looks tense. But then, the Queen smiles. This is quite pleasant. She dabs again. And tingly, like peppermint. Is it peppermint? You nod, cautiously. Mint grown along the riverbanks near Memphis. The Queen claps once. You'll prepare jars for the entire royal household. And just like that, you are now the Pharaoh's official mouthkeeper, or so the steward calls you, as he hastily writes out a small token contract on reed parchment. Your payment? Enough grain to feed your entire family for the season. A gold amulet shaped like a lotus flower. And, oddly, 2 live ducks. You're not sure what to do with the ducks, but you name one Salt and the other Sass. Word spreads quickly. In the days following, nobles come knocking, some curious, others outright desperate. One priest confesses he hasn't smiled in public in 3 years because of a persistent molar stench. Another offers you a small onyx figurine in exchange for a tongue paste that doesn't taste like dirt. You develop a small business. You hire your nephews to grind ingredients. Your aunt organizes jars by scent. You even start taking notes on who prefers which flavors. Spice lovers, flour fanatics, root chewers. Your satchel now carries tiny clay pots labeled in ink. Sweet, neutral, sharp, cleansing. You're basically the apothecary of oral hygiene. And yet, in the midst of your rising fame, you still find joy in the small things, wandering the market and spotting a vendor selling fennel seeds, cracking open a piece of sun-baked chalk and wondering if it might make a good abrasive, hearing a child laugh after tasting a mint rub and saying, "My tongue is dancing." You even start experimenting with breath fresheners. One afternoon, while chewing a clump of frankincense for its resinous tang, you muse that historians still argue whether chewing gums were primarily oral cleansers, hunger suppressants, or just ancient versions of popping bubble wrap. You decide all of the above. You prepare little balls of hardened honey and myrrh for the Queen's chambermaids. They melt slowly on the tongue and leave a perfumed trace. Soon, you can't keep up with demand. Of course, not everything is glamour and jasmine-scented rinses. You deal with one noble who insists his mouth is haunted. You offer him a rinse of garlic water and sage. He reports partial exorcism. Another insists his gums are shrinking. You tell him to stop chewing date pits like they're candy. You handle a lady who's angry because her peppermint rinse tastes too green. You smile and offer her the rose blend instead. Some days, you want to sneak back to your riverbank and rub twigs in peace, but something keeps you going. Maybe it's the way people light up when they feel cared for. Maybe it's the satisfaction of taking pain and replacing it with pleasure. Or maybe it's just the joy of tinkering, of finding new ways to make mouths feel like home. Late one night, you return to your family courtyard, tired but fulfilled. You sit under the stars, Salt and Sass clucking nearby, and start scribbling a new recipe on papyrus. This one includes tamarind pulp and lemon balm. You have no idea how it'll taste, but you can't wait to find out. By now, your reed basket of crushed rocks, herbs, and oils is rivaling the spice merchants in the central market. You've gone from the strange neighbor who sniffs sticks and hoards chalk to the palace-endorsed artisan of smiles. People begin calling you the tongue whisperer. You're not sure how you feel about that, but you lean into it anyway. After all, branding is everything. Even in 1400 BCE, you're experimenting constantly. You've learned that too much mint oil stings the gums, that ground lotus root is too pasty, That nobody wants a rinse that smells like boiled onions, no matter how antibacterial it might be. You're also starting to see a pattern. Your clients aren't just looking for clean teeth, they're looking for status. Fresh breath is fashionable, pale gums are chic, grit-free molars, positively regal, which is how you find yourself in the middle of Memphis's social season, being asked to prepare custom pastes for a noble couple's wedding. They want something romantic, but also medicinal, the bride-to-be tells you with a perfectly straight face. You suggest hibiscus powder with a touch of clove. Too seductive, she says. You nod. What about cardamom and crushed fig seed? She gasps. Perfect. Fig feels respectable. The groom just shrugs and asks if it'll make his teeth look whiter in the sunlight. You bite back a joke about him standing under a papyrus umbrella all day. Instead, you offer him a chalk-based paste with a dash of cinnamon. When the big day arrives, your custom pots are placed beside the ceremonial wine jugs, each labelled with gold ink, each wrapped in fine linen. Guests try them between courses. One uncle declares his rinse spicier than the roasted goose. You take it as a compliment. Still, all this success has consequences. Word spreads beyond Memphis. Traders passing through whisper about the one who puts flavor on sticks. A visiting merchant from Kush offers you lapis lazuli in exchange for your recipe. You decline, politely. He leaves a bit grumpy, muttering something about tooth, magic. Even worse, you now have competitors. One tries to sell a sacred sand blend with actual Nile silt. It smells like fish. Another claims their rinse was blessed by Ra himself and contains powdered sunstone. It's just crushed red ochre. You sigh. The market's getting saturated, literally. So, you do what any innovator does when facing copycats. You pivot. You begin focusing on prevention. Not just cleaning the teeth after the fact, but teaching people how to avoid dental pain altogether. You start offering free tongue inspections at the market. Just open up, say, "Ah," and I'll tell you if your teeth are plotting against you. Turns out most of them are. You begin handing out small scrolls with illustrated instructions. Rub the paste on gently, don't scrape the gums, and avoid chewing on copper coins. Yes, that's a thing. People follow your advice mostly. 1. Old fisherman swears chewing on date pits helps his jaw stay battle ready, and he's not giving that up. You let him be. The Queen's steward calls on you again. This time, you're asked to prepare a mouthwash for a visiting prince from the Levant. Something impressive, the steward insists. He chews pine resin between every meal. So, you create a concoction with pomegranate rind, honey, and a touch of crushed barley. It's tart, sweet, and sticks to the tongue just enough to make an impression. The prince later sends you a carved ivory box with a thank you note. My mouth sings. Not bad for someone who used to chew on sticks under a fig tree. Meanwhile, you're gathering curious apprentices. A teenage girl with nimble fingers helps you shape the clay pots. A quiet boy who memorizes every ingredient's weight down to the grain. You teach them how to sniff for rot, how to listen to a client's complaints, how to balance chalk with peppermint oil without causing what you now call the stingy mouth curse. One night, while grinding fennel seeds by lamplight, you find yourself smiling. This quiet, rhythmic work is what you love. Of course, nothing stays quiet for long. A priest from the Temple of Thoth requests your presence. You assume it's another inspection, but when you arrive, you find a stack of scrolls waiting. The priest leans in and says, "We're compiling a list of natural substances that promote bodily harmony. The high scribe believes your dental powders should be included." You nearly drop your jar, your rock paste. In the sacred pharmacopoeia, that's like being put in the same scroll as the recipe for eternal life, or at least the recipe for preventing overly funky breath in the afterlife. You take the task seriously. You document every combination you've tried. The peppermint salt blend, the cinnamon rose, the crushed eggshell experiments, which didn't work out, and the unlikely success of mixing dried orange peel with river mud. Historians still Argue whether these pharmacopoeias were practical manuals or mostly ceremonial, the priest says, not even looking up. You grin. Mine will be both. When you return home that night, you sit beneath the stars and begin your own scroll. Not for temples, not for nobles, for the future. You write, in crooked hieratic, if the tooth stings, soothe it. If the mouth smells, sweeten it. If the heart is heavy, choose something fragrant. It's not poetry, but it's yours. You wake the next morning to the sound of flutes echoing down the Nile. A celebration, it seems. Possibly another high priest's birthday, or maybe just someone survived a crocodile attack. Hard to say. You stretch, rinse your mouth with a splash of barley vinegar. Sharp, but oddly refreshing. And settle into your usual morning ritual. Stirring fresh paste, checking your ingredient jars, and sending a sleepy apprentice out for more dried myrrh. You've come a long way from chewing sticks under that fig tree. Your tooth care scroll is now being copied, one clumsy brushstroke at a time, by temple scribes who don't know cinnamon from cumin. Still, your name has found its way onto clay tablets and reed parchments alike. The mouth purifier of Memphis. One apothecary even added a little cartoon drawing of you to his wall, though he gave you an absurdly wide smile and a potbelly. You let it slide. Artistic license. Still, fame brings odd requests. One wealthy widow insists her dog needs a mouth rinse. His breath scares the fish, she says. You mix up a gentle concoction of mint and fig leaf for the pup. He licks it off the floor. A minor noble sends word he's lost all his teeth to date honey candies, but wants a paste that at least feels like chewing. You give him a smooth balm made of barley and aloe. He thanks you by gifting you a goat. The goat eats 2 of your scrolls and poops on your sandals, and then you receive the most bizarre commission yet. A priestess of Hathor approaches your stand, flanked by 2 attendants holding a heavily perfumed satchel. She hands you a sealed letter, a request from the temple itself. They want a ceremonial mouth, treatment to be used before chanting rituals, to purify the breath before speaking to the gods. You blink. You want a mouthwash for divine conversations? She nods. It must be fragrant, holy, and if possible, not sticky. Right, so you get to work. You begin with crushed rose petals, because nothing says sacred like a flower that doesn't grow well in sand. You blend in clove, crushed sea salt, and a splash of white wine. For extra flair, you steep the whole thing with a sliver of gold leaf, not for taste, just for sparkle. The first priest who tries it declares it kissed by Horus's wings. You consider printing that on a papyrus scroll. Later that week, your apprentice rushes in. The high priest wants to see you. Your heart skips. It turns out they want a full supply of your rinse for the festival of Opet. Thousands of people, singing, shouting, dancing in the streets. And apparently, everyone needs sweet breath. You try to imagine grinding that much. Fennel. Still, you accept. You gather your apprentices and begin mass production. Mortars clink. Chalk dust flies. Oils spill. One poor boy sneezes into a vat of mint oil and stinks of freshness for 3 straight days. But you get it done. On the morning of the festival, your jars are lined up beside the beer kegs and incense cones. A child accidentally drinks one, expecting wine, and declares it spicy tears. You give him a date cake to make up for it. As the parade begins, you stand by the temple steps, quietly watching the crowd swirl past. Painted dancers, priests in leopard skins, scribes shouting blessings. One singer pauses mid-chant to swish your rinse and wink at you. You've become part of the ritual. You, the toothstick chewer, the ground rock stirrer, the accidental healer of halitosis. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians really cared this much about oral hygiene, or whether it was just another way to show off their wealth and divine favor. But standing there, you know the truth. They did care. They didn't always understand why a thing worked, but they understood that a mouth that felt fresh, that didn't ache, that didn't smell of rot or swamp, and made life better, made speech clearer, made kissing less terrifying, and that was enough. Later that night, as the moon rises over the limestone temples and the Nile laps quietly at the docks, you sit on your clay stool and dip your finger into a leftover jar. Still good, still grainy, still you, still you. Your apprentices are asleep in the corner, curled up in piles of linen and herb sacks. A half-finished scroll rests on the table beside a small pot of orange peel rinse. You pick up your reed pen and write one final note in your recipe scroll. Do not underestimate the power of a clean mouth. It opens hearts, smooths words, and silences complaints. Also, do not chew rocks unless supervised. A soft breeze drifts through the window, carrying the smell of lotus blossoms and roasting garlic. You close your eyes. You've preserved not just teeth, but dignity, comfort, maybe even a little joy. And as you drift into sleep, your dreams are filled with gently foaming mouths, laughing priests, and the sound of mortars grinding rock into dust. You've built something that lasts, and your smile, it's still intact. The days roll by like slow waves on the Nile. You're older now, your fingers a little stiffer, your knees creaking like a wooden ship. But your mind is as sharp as obsidian. You still get up with the sun, though you no longer mix your own pastes. That job belongs to your apprentice's apprentice now, a nervy boy named Kefi, who somehow manages to sneeze every time he opens the mint jar. You mostly supervise, sipping barley tea and shaking your head when someone tries to skimp on the natron. Business has changed. You've moved off the noisy market streets and into a small shaded room beside a scribe's school. Clients now come to you quietly, merchants with gum pain, scribes with stained teeth, noblewomen with breath like fermented leeks. And your little scroll of recipes, it's grown. What started as a few smeared lines now fills 5 long scrolls, each copied 3 times and stored in reed-wrapped cases, safe from dust, goats, and careless elbows. The local doctor sometimes consults you, which is funny, considering he once scoffed at your spice potions. Now he wants to know what you use for bleeding gums. You tell him it's a secret, but really it's just fig sap and thyme. You've also become something of a neighborhood fixture. Children wave when they pass your window. Priests ask for the good rinse before long ceremonies. And once, a toothless, old farmer trudged all the way from his village to thank you. "You saved my wife's molar," he said, holding up a tiny, perfectly round tooth as proof. You still don't know what to say about that. Historians today might squint at your ingredients, chalk, salt, vinegar, crushed flowers, and wonder how anyone thought these were enough. But that's the thing about history. It isn't always about the grand monuments and glittering tombs. Sometimes it's about a mortar bowl, a reed pen, a dusty little shop where someone tried to make life a little less painful. And that was your goal all along. You remember faintly now the first time you saw someone smile after trying your rinse. It wasn't a noble or a priest. It was a basket weaver's daughter, no older than 10. Her toothache had been so bad she couldn't eat. You gave her a clove paste mixture, wrapped her cheek in warm linen, and hoped for the best. She came back 2 days later, chewing pomegranate seeds and grinning like a moonbeam. That smile, that was the real start of your career. Now as the sun dips below the western hills, you set down your cup and stand, slowly, one hand on the wall for balance. You walk outside. The street is quiet, only the low murmur of distant prayers and the soft shush of palm trees. You look up. The sky is a pale lavender, scattered with early stars. The same sky you've watched since your chewing stick days. You reach into your pouch and pull out a tiny pot. Your own blend, your favorite. A mix of anise, salt, and just a touch of date. Honey. You press a bit onto your gums, let it sit, and sigh. Still good. You lean against the doorway and watch a line of geese wobble past, guided by a sleepy boy with a reed flute. It's peaceful here. You've done well. You've left something behind. Not just jars and scrolls and cleaner mouths, but care, attention, a belief that even small comforts matter, even crushed rocks, when used gently, can heal. You sit back down, light a little oil lamp, and begin copying your final scroll, slowly, carefully, as the scent of fennel and chalk drifts softly around you. And now, everything slows. The Nile no longer rushes, it hums, gentle and deep. Your mortar and pestle sit still on the table, glinting faintly in the lamplight. The jars are sealed, the scrolls are safe, the soft crackle of burning oil flickers in the quiet room. You breathe in slowly, catching the faintest traces of mint, anise, and something warm, like desert wood after sunset. Your stool creaks as you shift slightly, your shoulders heavy in the best way. It's quiet now. Outside, the night creatures begin their song, low, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Frogs, distant flutes, the flutter of wings, nothing urgent, nothing sharp. Your eyelids grow heavier. You hear laughter in your memory, the giggle of a child with a clean mouth, the grunt of a merchant finally free from that aching molar, the polite gratitude of a priest just before he belts out a hymn. It all softens around you. Even the worries, the questions, the what-ifs, they melt. There's no hurry now. The stars keep their watch. The fan hums gently overhead. And somewhere in the distance, the Nile flows on, past reeds, past crocodiles, past temples and stones and stories yet to be told. You did enough. You helped. You gave comfort. And now, you rest. Drift softly, calmly, into sleep. Your jaw unclenches. Your breath slows. Your body lets go. The past is quiet. The world is still. And you are home. Home. You stand before a tomb, dry air curling around your ankles like sleepy cats. The limestone door has been pried open, not by grave robbers, but by a team of royal archivists, and you, lucky you, have been asked to assist. Not because you're the strongest or the most educated, but because, well, you know teeth. And this tomb is packed with them. Not loose teeth, mind you. Whole skeletons, rows upon rows of jaws, preserved over millennia beneath desert sands. Some say the dead here belonged to a priestly caste. Others think it was a wealthy merchant's family plot. Historians still argue whether the layout was meant to mimic a solar calendar, or if someone just liked straight lines. What's certain, though, is the state of their molars. You crouch down, brush, sand from a skull, and gently pry open the jaw. And there it is, smooth enamel worn down like river stones. That's not rot, it's wear, years of chewing bread so hard it could break a crocodile's tooth. Most people today think of cavities as the enemy, but here in ancient Egypt, the real danger was grit. Your flour, after all, came from grindstones, and those stones left behind tiny flecks of quartz, sand, and stone that embedded themselves in every bite. Imagine brushing with pumice and then chewing sandpaper pancakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You inspect another skull. This one has a deep abscess along the gum line, bone swelling where infection must have spread. There are no signs of modern dental tools, of course. No drills, no fillings. But you spot something interesting. A little resin plug. It's hardened now, cracked with time. But at some point, someone tried to seal this tooth, to keep the pain at bay. That, you think, is care. Someone tried. Maybe it was a fellow herbalist, maybe a mother, maybe even the person themselves, using tree sap and crushed seeds to make something like a plug. You spot a few more oddities, missing front teeth, likely knocked out during rough games, signs of jawbone healing, and in one rather surprising case, a gold wire, just a flicker of it, barely there, but enough to suggest someone had the means and the knowledge to secure a tooth in place. Perhaps even an early form of dental bridgework. Historians still argue whether these were practical, repairs or symbolic gestures meant to preserve the body's integrity for the afterlife. You lean toward practicality. After all, No one wants to enter paradise with a wobbling incisor. As the sun begins to set, casting golden stripes across the crypt floor, you make careful notes. Smooth enamel, sandware, molars ground to the root, and, in the margin of your scroll, you scribble a question. Do the dead still ache? The air smells like limestone and old parchment. You wrap up your tools and step outside. Another day, another set of silent smiles. You find yourself tiptoeing through a palace. Not just any palace, but one shimmering with alabaster walls, towering, lotus-shaped columns, and the faint scent of incense drifting through open corridors. You're here on royal business, dental business, because tonight the pharaoh has a toothache. Again, his court physician waves you over with a blend of urgency and annoyance. You've been summoned not for your rank or charm, but because you've got a steady hand and no fear of sticking it into a king's mouth. And oh, what a mouth it is. The pharaoh's teeth, surprisingly, are not gleaming rows of perfection. They're worn, yellowed at the edges, and show signs of the same hard-living diet that plagues his subjects. For all his gold and glory, even the living Horus chews on sand-laced bread. But there's one thing that sets royal molars apart, the hardware. As the king reclines on a cedar lounge, a small glint catches your eye. There, tucked discreetly near the back row, 2 teeth bound together with a fine golden wire. Delicate, elegant, and just a little ridiculous. No, it's not a grill. You're not in a hip-hop video. You're in 1300 BCE, and someone has figured out how to stabilize loose teeth with actual gold. Historians still argue whether this was purely decorative, a show of divine resilience, or an early attempt at a dental splint. Maybe all three. Nearby, a servant holds a pot of heated honey mixed with crushed herbs, an analgesic paste. You're instructed to apply it around the gum line. The mixture includes cinnamon, myrrh, and a touch of poppy extract. This is less about healing and more about numbing the royal nerve. You glance at the pharaoh, his eyes closed, mouth open like a yawning hippo, and wonder, did they feel pain the same way we do? Or did they just accept it as divine punishment for chewing? Like mortals. Later, in the palace archive, you flip through records of royal ailments. Queen Tai once lost a front tooth in her 30s. Ramses II, supposedly the most powerful king in history, had severe dental abscesses when he died. Some claim he walked around with a constant jaw infection. Try smiling through that in your state portrait. And yet, they tried to treat it. Court. Physicians documented dental remedies alongside curses for back pain, spells for fertility, and recipes for eyebrow growth. You find instructions for crafting dental gold. Melt the metal thin, braid it with linen fibers, and bind it around a decayed tooth like a sash. It wasn't just a status symbol, it was medical fashion. Another record details an elaborate offering made by a priest-turned-dentist, thanking Thoth for a successful extraction. The offering? A goose and 3 baskets of barley. Apparently, divine help didn't come cheap. 1. Scroll, worn at the edges, notes the construction of a small shrine to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and, oddly enough, healing. Inside that shrine, archaeologists found dental tools, tweezers, spoons, and a hooked bronze pick, suspiciously similar to your modern dentist's kit. Still, none of it stopped the pharaoh from wincing as you packed his aching molar with the honey herb paste. He'd probably prefer a clean extraction, but removing a royal tooth was taboo. After all, he needed to be whole to journey through the underworld. That tooth, aching, cracked, gold-wrapped, was his passport to eternity. You wash your hands, in perfumed water, and back out of the chamber, leaving the king to drift into a semi-hallucinogenic sleep. A priest murmurs a prayer. Somewhere, a harp begins to play. Your job is done, and no one lost a finger, not even yours. You rise before dawn, when the Nile still snoozes under its misty blanket, and the birds haven't quite decided whether they feel like chirping. Today, you're visiting the barbers, not for a haircut, for a tooth, because in ancient Egypt, The line between barber and surgeon was, let's say, flexible. You duck into a narrow stall near the Temple Market, where the smell of scented oils, goats, and nervous sweat hangs in the air. The barber greets you with a grin, mostly toothless himself, and gestures to a wooden bench darkened with use. It's less a clinic and more a cross between a pharmacy and a hardware store. Hooks dangle from the rafters, a blade collection sits proudly on display, and in the corner, a basket of herbs fights a losing battle against the smell of clove oil and unwashed linen. You're not here for your own toothache, thankfully. You're just observing. Because today, the patient is a local scribe with a molar that's more angry than useful. He sits, already sweating, chewing nervously on a date, pit. The barber, who moonlights as a tooth man, begins preparing the tools. Nothing fancy, just a hooked bronze pick, a curved scraper, and a bit of string that might once have tied up a papyrus scroll. And then the ritual begins. First the herbal compress, mashed figs, onion paste, and a pinch of frankincense, warmed in a small clay pot and applied to the jaw. It's meant to soften the tissue and, ideally, the nerves. Historians still argue whether this was based on trial and error wisdom or pure superstition. Either way, it smells like lunch gone wrong. Then comes the recitation. The barber murmurs a few lines invoking Aset, the goddess Isis, protector of healing and magic. A prayer or a distraction? Hard to say. The scribe seems too focused on not fainting to notice. And now, the tooth. With surprising speed, the barber slips the pick beneath the aching molar, twists and pulls. The sound is somewhere between a crunch and a pop, a noise that suggests this scribe will be eating only lentils for a while. Blood is staunched with linen soaked in vinegar and salt. The extracted tooth? Placed reverently in a small woven basket. You're told it'll be buried in the temple's outer courtyard, lest the angry spirit within return to curse its former owner. Because yes, teeth had spirits. Everything did. And a cranky molar left unattended could sour your karma. Back at the healer's quarters, you flip through a few folk scrolls and notes left behind by earlier toothmen. One describes a cure involving crocodile dung mixed with pomegranate juice, applied directly to sore gums. Another recommends chewing on willow bark, a natural source of salicin, the same compound that would, thousands of years later, become aspirin. Was it effective? Occasionally. Was it gross? Frequently. One scribe's diary even records a travelling gum charmer who sang songs to bad teeth and promised they'd fall out on their own if politely asked. Spoiler, they didn't. You reflect on the scene. No anesthesia. No sanitized metal trays. Just herbs, bronze, prayer, and guts. Modern dentistry has come a long way, yes. But there's something oddly comforting about how ordinary folks back then handled the ache. No clinics, no queues, just a barber, a stool, and maybe a God's blessed poultice. You step back into the sunlight as the scribe groans behind you, gripping his jaw like a man who's just seen both heaven and hell. A boy rushes over with a warm beer and a handful of dates. Not the best recovery food, you think, but it's the thought that counts. And as you walk back through the dusty street, teeth intact, you can't help but appreciate the quiet victory of a single, pain-free chew. You're standing ankle-deep in the muddy edge of the Nile, staring down at an open-mouthed corpse. Don't panic. It's not a murder scene. It's a mummy. Well, part of one. Today's assignment brings you to the embalmer's workshop, a place where death is less a tragedy and more a highly scheduled ritual. The man before you, what's left of him anyway, is here to be immortalized. And that includes, surprisingly, a bit of dental work. The embalmers work with eerie calm, their hands practiced, their faces stoic. The body is coated in natron salts, the organs carefully removed and set aside, and the head, still very much attached, is receiving a special kind of attention. One of the assistants peers into the mummy's mouth, clicks his tongue, and reaches for what looks like a small chisel. You step in for a closer look and realize He's adjusting the teeth. Not pulling, not stuffing, adjusting. The Egyptians believed the body needed to be complete in the afterlife. Not just whole, but pleasant looking. And that meant fixing what time, death, or a stubborn diet may have ruined. Some mummies have been found with resin-packed teeth, like makeshift fillings. Others show signs of linen stuffed into the jaw to puff up sunken cheeks. And a few elite specimens, they received false teeth. Not porcelain, of course. This isn't Beverly Hills. But carved ivory, shaped bone, or shell. Historians still argue whether these false teeth were functional during life, or purely decorative in death. Some scholars insist they were death masks for the molars, stage props for the afterlife. You watch as the assistant smooths resin around a cracked incisor. He mutters a phrase to Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, and begins sealing the mouth with a paste made of honey, herbs, and what smells suspiciously like cedar oil. Not for flavor, for preservation. You glance at the tool set on the table. Bronze picks, linen rolls, a curved blade known as a MWT, and a copper mirror. Presumably not for checking one's smile, but perhaps for reflecting bad spirits away from the corpse's face. Nearby, a priest recites the opening of the mouth ceremony. You've heard about this. It's not metaphorical, it's literal. A ritual designed to give the dead their senses back so they can eat, breathe, speak, and yes, chew in the afterlife. The embalmers gently pry the mouth open with a ceremonial adze. It's like a dental crowbar from the divine department. They believe that without this ritual, the deceased cannot partake in the joys of the field of reeds, the lush paradise awaiting worthy souls. And who wants to show up in eternity with a chipped tooth? As you observe, one of the embalmers turns to you and offers a sleepy smile. He gestures to a second body, this one wrapped up and ready for sealing. You notice the faint outline of a bead in the mouth, perhaps a charm to ward off dental demons. You've heard of these before. Tiny amulets placed on the tongue or between. The gums inscribed with protective symbols, like braces from another dimension. Back in town, records from burial sites mention clay tablets noting dental repairs performed post-mortem. One scroll even describes a tooth prayer meant to be recited by grieving families. May his molars grind the food of Ra. May his tongue taste the honey of Osiris. The ancient Egyptians weren't just obsessed with cleanliness and death. They were, oddly enough, obsessed with continuity, and that included a full set of working teeth, even if you didn't need to use them anymore. You finish your visit by stepping into the embalmer's storeroom. It smells like spices and dust. Rows of jars, pots, and neatly bundled cloths line the walls. And there, in a side alcove, you spot something unexpected. A box labeled, crudely, in red ochre, tooth parts. Inside, fragments of ivory, splinters of shell, and what might once have been a canine. Were these spare parts? Failed experiments? Or just offerings for when the divine dentist came calling? Either way, you back out slowly, careful not to disturb the jars. And as the sun begins to dip over the Nile, casting gold across the mud-brick walls, you can't help but think, the afterlife, it seems, has a pretty strict dental policy. You duck into a shady courtyard tucked behind a temple. A handful of women sit in a circle, weaving baskets and exchanging gossip. One of them notices you lingering and waves you over, motioning to an empty spot beneath a date palm. You plop down awkwardly. Someone offers you a fig. Someone else offers you, oddly enough, a twig. Not just any twig. A miswak, or as the locals sometimes call it, a chewing stick. And before you can ask what you're supposed to do with it, the woman next to you begins demonstrating. She peels the bark from the tip with her teeth, softens the wood fibers with her molars, and gently starts scrubbing her teeth with it. No paste, no mirror, just calm repetition. The smell is earthy, a little spicy, like cinnamon, with a splash of Nile mud. Historians still argue whether the ancient miswak was native to Egypt, or imported from regions further south, perhaps Nubia or even Arabia. But either way, the idea is unmistakably clever. Nature's own toothbrush, portable and biodegradable. The women here swear by it. One tells you it keeps her mouth cool in the sun. Another says it tricks bad spirits into thinking you're too clean to haunt. Hard to argue with that logic. You take your twig and give it a try. It's surprisingly sturdy, with just enough flex to be satisfying. You can feel the fibers reaching between your teeth, like natural floss. And no mint, of course, but a subtle tingle spreads across your gums. Refreshing, in a dusty kind of way. Turns out the miswak isn't just folklore. Modern researchers have found it contains antibacterial compounds, fluoride, silica, and even tannins that help protect the enamel. So yes, it scrubs, freshens, and fights plaque, all without the embarrassment of spitting into a decorative pot. One of the women laughs at your technique and gently adjusts your grip. Not like you're attacking it, she says, like you're coaxing it. You nod, trying to coax it more softly. It helps. A child runs past, chasing a chicken. The stick falls from your mouth, and before you can retrieve it, a goat snatches it up. You're handed another twig without comment. This, you realize, is a normal part of oral hygiene in ancient Egypt. Around you, the conversation shifts to something vaguely dental. One woman describes a dream where a crocodile ate her teeth. Another talks about her husband's habit of sucking on lotus roots to keep his breath smelling like joy. You're not entirely convinced, but you make a mental note anyway. Behind the courtyard is a small shrine. Painted on the walls are scenes of daily life. Farming, fishing, praying, and yes, brushing teeth. A man uses what looks like a feather or palm frond to sweep across his mouth. Another has a miswak in each hand, wielding them like ceremonial daggers. Okay, maybe not daggers, but the image is oddly martial. Like oral care is a spiritual battle. You spot a small inscription in hieroglyphs. A rough translation reads, "He who speaks sweetly must first brush with the blessing of the tree." Poetic. And the tree in question? Likely Salvadora persica, a bushy, scrappy plant that thrives in hot, arid regions. Its branches are dense with fibrous stems, perfect for crafting chewing sticks. And bonus, the roots can be used for the same purpose. Talk about a full-service shrub. As the afternoon wears on, the women begin packing up their baskets. One of them hands you a satchel of miswak twigs. "Gifts," she says, "for the long walk back to your time." You thank her, tucking the bundle into your linen wrap like precious cargo. It may not be flashy, but it's effective, and far more portable than a 20-step modern dental kit. As you stand, the woman who first gave you the twig gives a final tip. Use it after dates, not before. Always after. You raise an eyebrow. "Why?" She shrugs. "Because dates lie. They pretend they're soft, but they hide sand." Fair point. You leave the courtyard with a mouth that feels oddly refreshed and a renewed appreciation for prehistoric toothbrushes. No batteries, no bristles, no peppermint foam. Just a twig, a smile, and a lot of practice. Behind you, the soft murmur of the women fades into the rustle of palm leaves. A goat belches. The sun hangs heavy over the Nile, and you chew slowly on your miswak, pacing yourself for one last stroll through the ancient world. You meander past another quiet courtyard, this one filled not with people, but with amphorae. Rows upon rows of sun-baked pottery line the walls, all stoppered with wax or linen, some marked with painted hieroglyphs or faint ink smudges. You step closer. The air smells faintly of vinegar, honey, and something sharply mineral. It tickles your nose. A boy with a wide grin points to a sealed jar. "For mouth storms," he says proudly. You blink. "Mouth storms?" He nods solemnly. "When your breath makes crocodiles faint." "Ah, halitosis." You watch as he expertly uncorks the jar and dips a reed stick into the viscous goop inside. He swirls it around like he's stirring a potion, then gestures for you to try. The taste is unexpected. Imagine if fennel seeds, myrrh resin, crushed barley, and spoiled beer all went to a spa together and emerged as a gel. It's not delicious, but strangely effective. Your mouth feels immediately less dry, and a weird minty bitter aftertaste settles in. Historians still debate the exact recipes used in these early breath fresheners. Some records point to a base of natron and honey, others to pomegranate rind steeped in wine, mixed with aromatic herbs like mint, cinnamon, or cardamom, and of course always a pinch of something antimicrobial, frankincense perhaps, or ground date pits. You take a seat beside the boy and look out at the Nile. He starts explaining his favorite mouth-storm cures like he's listing prized treasures. There's the sun-rinsed barley rinse, the crushed melon seed spit, and something called fire powder, which he warns you not to sniff directly. Beside him, a leather scroll rests half-curled in the shade. He nudges it toward you. It's a copy of a medical text, possibly from the famed Edwin Smith papyrus, or its lesser-known cousin, the Ebers papyrus. You unroll a section slowly. One passage catches your eye. If the mouth is foul and the teeth ache, apply the paste of goose fat, green lead, and incense. Rinse with warm beer. Repeat until silence returns to the jaw. Silence returns to the jaw. That's poetic and mildly ominous. It's worth noting that many of these ancient remedies walk the fine line between science and sorcery. Some ingredients, like natron, do indeed have cleaning properties. Others, like crushed turquoise or malachite, seem more symbolic. And still others, yes, looking at you, green lead, are probably what gave Egyptians such terrible dental wear to begin with. But the ritual of it, the act of cleaning the mouth, of preparing one's breath for a temple visit or a romantic encounter, felt deeply personal. Not just hygiene, but honor. The boy tosses you a reed tube. You try now. You do. It's like brushing your teeth with a licorice-scented broth and a tiny broom. After a few awkward swirls and a slight coughing fit, you find your rhythm. Swish. Spit. Swish again. Your mouth feels oddly revived. Less like a storm and more like a drizzle now. The amphorae around you, once quiet, seem to lean in like guardians of forgotten recipes. You run your fingers along the dusty clay and find tiny inscriptions, prayers, maybe, or warnings. One reads, roughly, "Speak well, smell better." Another, "The gods do not hear foul tongues." A third, "Do not trust a man whose breath smells like onions on the 5th day." Harsh but fair. You imagine priests using these brews before entering the temple, courtiers dabbing their tongues before an audience with Pharaoh, or lovers preparing for a moonlit meeting by rinsing with clove-studded wine, and maybe, just maybe, someone like you, drifting through time, clutching a miswak twig and wondering how anyone functioned without toothpaste caps or travel-size floss. A tall, older woman enters the courtyard. She examines your breath with a sniff and a smirk. "Still stormy," she says. Then, she hands you a dried lotus pod. Chew that. It sweetens dreams. You accept it. Crunch it gently. It tastes nutty, floral, and somehow clean. As the sun begins to lower toward the west bank, you rise. The amphorae seem to shimmer under the golden light, like they're alive with secrets. You thank the boy, who shrugs and goes back to stirring his mystery goop. With each step, your breath now carries the faint scent of fennel and lotus. Not bad, all things considered. And as you walk, you murmur the phrase again, under your breath. Silence returns to the jaw. You don't know what that truly means, but it sounds like something worth sleeping on. The alley bends once more, revealing a surprisingly modern-looking sight. A bustling workshop full of mortars and pestles, reed scales, and rows of ceramic jars. Welcome to the apothecary's domain, though here, in Thebes or Memphis, It's less a pharmacy and more a blend of chemist's lab, priest's altar, and dental prep station. You duck under a low beam and step inside. The scent hits you. First, sweet, musky, pungent. There's frankincense in the air, alongside dried rose petals, burnt cinnamon, and something metallic. In the corner, an apprentice is pounding something into powder using a heavy stone mortar. Each thunk sounds like the ticking of a very sleepy metronome. Crocodile teeth, the boy says casually. For gum blessings. Of course. You step back just slightly. The master apothecary gives you a polite nod, then gestures to a low stool. You sit, surrounded by what can only be described as the ancient world's equivalent of a whitening station. Here, you'll find the tools and tinctures used to prepare Egypt's most advanced toothpaste, or at least its best guess. On the bench, beside you, there's a pile of rock salt, a dish of dried iris root, flakes of myrrh, and, yes, some of that infamous powdered pumice stone. A tiny reed brush lies next to them, its bristles made from split palm fibers bound with linen. He speaks as he works. Teeth must shine for the gods to see you clearly, a little poetic, a little threatening. He mixes the pumice with vinegar and water, creating a gritty paste. It looks like something a modern dentist would file under abrasive enough to etch glass. And yet this was cutting-edge cleanliness. The Egyptians were among the first to use toothpaste, long before Rome or even Greece caught on. Their versions varied, from honey-based pastes to harsh powders of ground antelope horn or eggshell. Historians still argue whether these mixtures were primarily medicinal or ritualistic. Some believe they were more spiritual preparations than hygiene routines. Others insist the abrasiveness alone shows genuine concern for dental decay, even if their methods were, well, a little aggressive. You're handed a stick tipped with cotton, dipped in a mysterious dark red salve. It smells like clove and copper. You dab a little on your gums. There's a burning sensation. Then numbness. Peppermint leaf and powdered hematite, the apothecary says with a shrug. Good for tooth spirits. Tooth spirits? You look around the room more closely. Shelves hold not only ingredients, but tiny statues of Taweret and Bais, gods of protection, childbirth, and oddly enough, dental wards. A small offering of bread and beer sits next to them. You begin to understand. This is not just about health. It's a pact, a ritual. You protect your teeth, and in return, they protect your speech, your ability to eat, maybe even your dreams. The apprentice hands you another mixture, this one soft and white, made with natron, crushed date seeds, and mint. You're told it's for whitening. It tastes slightly better than the last, but leaves your mouth dry, like you've just licked a pottery shard. You rinse with barley water and spit into a jar filled with sand. Don't step in it, warns the apprentice. It's cursed. You lift an eyebrow. How cursed? Stomach knots for 3 days, he replies with a grin. Noted. You're shown more treatments, some involving waxy pastes that must be heated over coals, others designed for tooth soothing, which involves a complicated process of singing, softly, while chewing dried fig leaves. You try one. The fig leaf tastes like dusty sunshine. The song, which you hum softly, is oddly calming. As you glance back at the bench, something catches your eye. A worn scroll. You unroll a bit and see a line you can barely translate. It mentions a tooth of fire and a paste of peace. You imagine a dentist from this time, dressed not in white, but in linen and turquoise jewelry, leaning over a patient with a reed brush, chanting a protective spell and sprinkling dried papyrus ash on the tongue. Oddly charming, slightly terrifying. The apothecary finishes mixing a final concoction, a kind of tooth lacquer made from tree resin and bitumen. It's glossy, sticky, and allegedly seals small cracks. He applies it to a tiny wooden figurine to demonstrate. Don't use on living teeth, he says, almost as an afterthought. You nod gravely. The hour grows late. Outside, the shadows stretch long. You thank the apothecary, who nods and places a small clay tablet in your hand. For remembrance, he murmurs. On it is etched the symbol of an open mouth, with 2 lines of rays above it. Perhaps a prayer, or maybe, just maybe, a 5-star review. As you step out into the dusk, your teeth are gritty, your gums slightly numb, and your tongue is coated in fennel dust. But you feel, strangely, clean. Not modern clean, not fluoride clean, but clean in a way that echoes through temples, through tombs, through time itself. And somewhere deep inside, part of you is grateful you didn't end up with crocodile teeth. You wander down a narrow side street, lined with painted walls and faint carvings of ibis-headed scribes. A breeze flutters the linen draped over one doorway, and you're pulled toward it, not by scent or sound, but by a vague pull of curiosity. Inside, it's dim and quiet. A woman sits cross-legged on a reed mat, sorting bundles of dried herbs, chunks of charcoal, and tiny jars filled with curious pastes. She looks up and smiles faintly. "You've come for the coal, haven't you?" she says. Not exactly. But now that she mentions it, she beckons you closer. This isn't a perfumery, nor a temple apothecary. It's something far more ordinary. A beauty parlor, or at least the New Kingdom version of one. And what you'll soon realize is this. Much of ancient Egyptian beauty culture overlapped with what we'd now call dental hygiene. Or maybe dental presentation is more accurate. You sit across from her. She picks up a small curved stick and uses it to stir a pot of soot-black coal. Then, gently, she brushes it along the inside of her own lips. Yes, the inside. Charcoal. Teeth painting, she explains, makes them look whiter. And there it is, the ancient version of optical illusion dentistry. You whiten your smile not by bleaching your teeth, but by darkening the gums and lips to create contrast. Smart. Deceptively so. Some historians argue this cosmetic technique was more about religious symbolism, aligning the body with sacred darkness, or emphasizing Ma'at's balance between shadow and light. Others say it was just the TikTok filter of its time. Who's to say? She shows you a tiny mirror made of polished copper. When you look inside, your own teeth, already pumice and mint-smeared from the apothecary visit. Look, almost glowing. She chuckles. You're ready for the afterlife banquet. Great. Great. Nearby, another young woman sits weaving fine linen threads through a papyrus comb. She's preparing dental floss, of a sort. Egyptians used frayed linen or palm fibers to clean between the teeth, especially before rituals or temple visits. You try a strand. It's rough, but satisfying in the way only primitive flossing can be. And then comes the most surprising tool of all. A soft leather pouch filled with ground barley, acacia sap, and something that smells suspiciously like honey. It's handed to you as a sort of chew pouch. You're meant to bite down gently and let the mixture work as both mouth freshener and gum salve. You chew. It's odd, a little like granola soaked in cough syrup, but your breath does smell better afterward, at least by Bronze Age standards. The woman gestures toward a low bowl filled with water and flower petals. Swish. You rinse, spit, and then pause as she sprinkles a pinch of blue powder into your palm. What's this? Lapis mouth charm, she says. Deadpan. Lick it before negotiations. Makes your words sweeter. You do not lick it. She winks anyway. There's an entire cosmetic philosophy unfolding here, where appearance isn't about vanity, but about presenting a whole, balanced self to others and to the gods. Clean teeth weren't merely hygienic, they were spiritual. Your smile was a statement. It showed harmony, health, and preparedness for Judgment Day. Don't forget your breath, the woman says, and produces something that looks like a tiny toothbrush with a beetle tied to the end. You squint. She laughs. Just a joke. It's for scaring children. You're not entirely convinced. Behind her, hung on a reed wall, are several sketches, rudimentary drawings of women with radiant smiles, long painted eyes, and decorative headbands. This beauty salon isn't just about cleaning and prepping. It's about envisioning ideal forms. One image even shows a figure with pearl-like teeth, though that's clearly an exaggeration. Even the fanciest nobles had their struggles with sand-worn enamel and cracked molars. You lean back against a cushion and breathe in the scent of crushed lotus petals and burnt cedar. There's a certain peace here. No urgency, no sterile white walls, just people taking the time to groom and prepare and maybe flirt with a little dental alchemy on the side. The woman gently massages your jaw with oil. Tension lives here, she murmurs. Too much sand in your dreams? You nod. Because honestly? Probably. She rubs a small circle behind your ear. Your eyelids grow heavy. The glow of the copper mirror flickers with a breeze. Outside, someone is singing softly. You can't catch the words, but the rhythm is soothing, like oars pulling gently through the Nile. Try not to grind your teeth when you sleep, she advises, placing a tiny reed ball beneath your tongue. Scented with mint and clover, keeps night spirits away. And just like that, you're reclining on the mat, surrounded by smiling women, glowing copper, and the faintest hint of rosewater in the air. You're not sure if this is dental care, beauty culture, or dream therapy, but it works. As you drift, one thought crosses your mind. When your teeth look this good, even the gods might let you talk first in the afterlife. You wake, or maybe you never fully drifted off, still lying on that woven mat, the floral scent of rosewater lingering faintly on your lips. Outside, the day is beginning to dim. The red-gold light of the setting sun casts long, sleepy shadows through the reed slats of the salon. You stretch, roll your jaw, and decide it's time to walk again. You wander deeper into the neighborhood now, where the limestone buildings rise a little higher and the walls are coated in faded murals. There's a scent in the air that you can't quite place, like freshly mixed clay maybe, with a pinch of warm sesame. Around the next corner, you spot a man sitting cross-legged in front of what appears to be a furnace, a tiny one, shaped like a bird's belly. He's heating something with intense care. Next to him are racks of what look like small tooth-shaped beads. You've stumbled into the workshop of a prosthetic artisan, because yes, the ancient Egyptians did make false teeth, or at least we think they might have. Historians still argue whether these early dental prostheses were functional, symbolic, or just funerary flourishes. Some remains show teeth held together by gold wire. Others have ivory plugs in place, of molars. But none of these seemed very chewable. The man notices your interest and waves you over. He lifts one of the items from the heat. A small, jaw-shaped frame of bone, fitted with something suspiciously like human teeth. Temple burial prep, he murmurs, barely looking up. Priest's mouth must be whole. He sets the piece down and begins polishing it with smooth pumice stone. His hands move automatically, like someone who's done this for decades. Maybe longer, you pick up a less finished piece. It's rough and awkward, with two small notches meant to fit around neighboring teeth, almost like a puzzle. Do people wear these while alive, you ask? He shrugs. Sometimes, but not for long. Not surprising. With no anesthesia, no antibiotics, and only very basic materials, fitting someone with even a crude bridge must have been, well, let's say it wasn't a gentle experience. Egyptian dentistry may have been ahead of its time, but it certainly didn't involve reclining chairs and laughing gas. Still, the effort is impressive. The idea that someone cared enough to try replacing a tooth, whether for function, form, or spiritual completeness, says something about their priorities, about their fear of the afterlife, or maybe just their desire to keep smiling while chewing lotus root. You watch as the artisan dips a bone tool into warm beeswax and applies it delicately to one of the molar models. This holds it in place long enough for burial, he explains. But the gods know it isn't real. There's something strangely touching about this. You imagine the deceased, laid out in their finest linen, gold amulets glinting in the candlelight, and a single, slightly wobbly tooth tucked into place, just before the lid is closed. Down the bench, you notice a few other oddities. One set of teeth has symbols carved into the enamel, tiny hieroglyphs. Another has been inlaid with turquoise, which seems extremely uncomfortable but undeniably stylish. These were clearly not practical tools for chewing. They were displays, tokens, maybe even rituals. You begin to suspect that dentistry in ancient Egypt wasn't just medical, it was magical. The artisan leans back and lights a cone of myrrh, incense. Want to try one? You hesitate, then accept. He fits a simple ivory plug between two of your lower molars. It doesn't hurt, but it feels foreign, like you've tucked a small bead in your cheek and forgotten about it. You test it with your tongue. The artisan smiles faintly. Now you'll talk sweeter, he says. You're beginning to sense a theme. He hands you a cloth-wrapped bundle of small items, fragments of ivory, twine, beeswax sticks, and a tiny chisel. For emergencies, he says with a wink. You're not sure what kind of emergencies involve homemade dentures, but you nod politely. As you leave, you realize the light has nearly faded. Lamps flicker to life in the doorways, glowing like golden fireflies against the dusk. The sound of soft flute music drifts through the street, and above you, the stars are starting to appear, one by one, like pinpricks in the dark velvet of the sky. Your jaw still feels slightly off-center, but you're getting used to it. You pause near a well to rinse your mouth, and for a moment you just sit there, listening to the rhythm of water being pulled in buckets, the quiet chatter of families preparing for rest. It's a calmness that settles deep into your chest. The man with the furnace reappears at his doorway, silhouetted against the amber light. "Don't chew anything too hard tonight," he calls. You raise a hand in mock salute. It's good advice. After all, even ancient Egyptian dentistry had its limits. You lean back against the well, stare up at the stars, and realize something odd. Your mouth feels clean. For a moment, it's just you, the breeze, and the faint scent of mint on your breath. The desert is quiet now, wrapped in linen and shadows. And somewhere nearby, someone else is cleaning their teeth with crushed rocks, just like you. The stars shimmer above you like scattered barley seeds across black silt. The air is still, and for a long while, you just sit. But something, a whisper of curiosity maybe, or the faint itch of unbrushed molars, draws you to your feet again. Tonight, you think, you'll head toward the necropolis. A strange choice. For a midnight stroll, perhaps. But if the ancient Egyptians took such care to preserve their teeth in death, well, maybe there's something worth learning among the tombs. You pass through the quiet outskirts of the village, where houses thin into date palm groves and stray dogs doze in the dust. The sand crunches gently beneath your sandals. Somewhere, a cicada begins its lazy song. Ahead, the great mounds rise. Tombs, mastabas, old burial shafts covered in cracked stone and half-buried hieroglyphs. You duck under a low lintel and enter what must have once been a family chamber. It's cooler here. The air smells of limestone and secrets. And in the center of the room, laid out on a slab, is a skeleton. No sarcophagus, no gilded coffin, just old bones wrapped in linen, their teeth catching the lamplight like tiny pearls. You crouch for a closer look. The teeth are surprisingly intact, worn, yes, but still in their proper places. The molars are flattened from years of chewing coarse bread. The front teeth are chipped, maybe from pulling threads or splitting reeds, but they're all there. A small pottery dish lies beside the skull. Inside, it is a residue of dried herbs, chalky white grit, and a smear of something dark, possibly myrrh. Someone clearly placed it there with intention. Maybe this was a loved one's last offering, or a sort of funerary last brushing. Historians still argue whether tooth powders were used in death rituals or simply part of daily cleansing. Some tomb paintings even show people holding small sticks to their lips in the afterlife, as if brushing one's teeth was as eternal as the soul. You gently pick up the pot. It's labeled with a symbol you recognize now, a mouth and a droplet, likely a dental formula. What's curious is that despite everything, the rituals, the tools, the crushed rocks, most Egyptians had pretty terrible dental health. Their teeth were often ground down to stubs by age 30. Why? Because even though they brushed daily, the bread they ate was filled with sand. Literally, grain was ground on basalt slabs, which shed tiny particles into the flour. Every bite was like chewing on invisible grit. So even if you brushed religiously, with natron and herbs, your teeth were under constant assault from the food itself. It's like cleaning your windows during a sandstorm. And yet, they kept brushing. They carried little toothsticks made from frayed twigs. Miswax, essentially. The same tool that would be used centuries later by Islamic cultures. Some were made from aromatic woods, others soaked in cinnamon oil or clove. You wonder what this person's last brush smelled like. You lean back against the tomb wall and close your eyes. This skeleton, let's call him Paheri, just for fun, probably, never knew why his teeth hurt. He might have thought it was a curse, or the result of impure thoughts. Maybe he went to a healer who smeared honey and copper paste on his gums, whispering prayers to Sekhmet, the goddess of healing. And maybe that worked. For a while. But eventually, pain returns, infections spread, and still, every morning, Paheri would wake, splash cold water on his face, and scrub his teeth with his little twig. Just as you did earlier, you place the jar back on the stone and brush a thin layer of sand from your legs. In the distance, the soft drumbeat of a festival carries on the breeze, some feast day perhaps, dedicated to Hathor or Osiris. Music and laughter float across the dunes like distant waves. You walk a little farther and find another chamber, this one still sealed with a faded cartouche. Inside, painted walls depict scenes of the afterlife. Fields of grain, lotus ponds, long banquets with fig cakes and honeyed wine. And near the banquet table, a servant with a bowl and a toothbrush. Yes, even in the imagined eternity, the ancient Egyptians kept to their rituals. Teeth had to be clean before speaking to the gods. Breath sweetened with mint before reciting the 42 negative confessions. There was no room in paradise for gingivitis. You smile at that. Paheri would approve. You settle on the stone floor. It's cool and surprisingly smooth. Above, the ceiling is painted like a starry night, which feels appropriate. You realize something else. The journey today, through markets and barbershops and perfumers, through powders and pastes and pickled figs, wasn't just about dental care. It was about dignity, about ritual, about the quiet daily acts that tether people to meaning, even when those acts involve crushed rocks and crocodile dung. You close your eyes and let your breath slow. The air smells faintly of chamomile and stone. Somewhere nearby, a small gecko chirps, then goes silent. The tomb is utterly still. The afterlife, it seems, is very peaceful. You imagine yourself brushing your teeth for the last time, not out of habit, but as a farewell. A quiet thank you to your body, to your breath, to all the mornings you greeted, with mint and myrrh, one last scrub for the road, and maybe, just maybe, that final brushing echoes through the ages, carried in powder and clay, from the mouth of a linen-wrapped skeleton to yours, tonight, under the stars. So now, with your journey complete, and the stars still keeping watch over ancient sands, you let yourself drift. The tomb around you fades from stone to silence, then from silence to a kind of quiet warmth, a lull that wraps around your thoughts like linen strips, gently pressing them into stillness. That old toothbrush made from olive twigs, still clutched in the hand of a 3,000-year-old mummy. It's a little funny now, not because it's strange, but because it's so tender, so human, like brushing your teeth before bed, even if the day was long, even if no one else will notice, because it's yours, your ritual, your dignity, your breath carried softly into tomorrow. You think again of Paheri, his little clay bowl, his worn-down molars, the faint minty scent of crushed herbs rising in the morning light. He didn't know you'd visit him one day, but you did. And maybe, for a moment, he knew. And now, your body, heavy as limestone, wants nothing more than to be still. Your limbs, cool and calm, sink into the stone floor of your imagination. No sand in your shoes, no sun on your neck, just the quiet hum of time, stretching out like the Nile, slow and wide and unbothered. You're ready now. You've seen enough for one night, so breathe. In slow, out slower, like the ebb of a desert wind at dawn. And as the old kingdom dreams, tucked beneath layers of earth and memory, you, too, find your place among the stillness.